Drinking a dram is delicate business. If you have one, more are sure to follow.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was a short excerpt from our feature film, Dances with Buffaloes. Welcome to Dram Talk.
I'm Brad.
And I'm Daniel.
So today on the pod, we've swapped those vast hills of Speyside and those peaty bogs of Isla that we love so much for bourbon country.
What? Bourbon country?
You heard me right.
Ooh, change of pace for us.
Yeah, jumping across the pond. I mean, we can't really say jumping across the pond. We're on the other side of the world, but
both of them are jumping across the pond for us.
Yeah, we've got a pretty large pond to skip across for us.
Yeah, so if we started this podcast located in Scotland, then we have jumped across the pond to America, to particularly Kentucky, I believe. Kentucky.
Yes. So on the table today, we've got Buffalo Trace, Longbranch, and the Elijah Craig small batch.
Okay, so 3 different bourbons from 3 different distilleries. Like, I think before we get into these bottles, should we just, I guess, discuss the difference between bourbon and scotch?
Yeah, we'll just do like a really, really brief overview of bourbon.
Like a crash course in bourbon.
Yeah, like a super crash course. Don't kill us if we're skipping anything. Just send us through an email, get in contact if we've missed anything and we've offended anyone.
Correct our mistakes, and we apologize for anyone currently in bourbon country if we've underrepresented this magnificent liquor you guys have produced.
Yeah, so for a whiskey to actually call itself bourbon, its mash, which is the mixture of grains from which the product is distilled, must contain at least 51% corn. And the mash must be distilled at 160 proof or less.
Okay, wait, stop. What's proof?
Right, yeah, so on some bourbon bottles, you'll see proof labeled there alongside the ABV.
So
now, the only bottle that we have with that today is the Elijah Craig.
Yeah, so if I pick it up, it says 94 proof.
Yeah.
What is that in ABV?
Yes.
How do we work that out?
So to work it out, you just divide it by 2. Easy.
So 47%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, super easy. And I know some scotch might have proof on there. I think I've seen it on a couple of bottles.
I have as well,
but it doesn't translate as easy as just divided by 2. I mean, why do that, right?
No. Why have a simple, cohesive system for measuring the alcohol percentage in your liquor? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think maybe one day we might go back and look at the way they measure proof, but that's a tale with slavery, piracy, and all that.
So quite an intricate story that I think we're not going to be able to cover in our very concise crash course of bourbon.
No,
Let's just stick to
not today.
Stick to dividing proof by half here.
Yeah, so unlike scotch, no color can actually be added to bourbon. So if you actually want to legally call what you've distilled bourbon, you can't put anything in it.
Okay, so everything is natural color then. So all the liquids we're seeing on the table here, they're natural color. Yeah. And like for scotch, though, the only coloring that can be added is that caramel coloring, the E150A.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that they can add to scotch. That's the only coloring they're able to add to scotch, and that does give it its consistent classic caramel color. But even just looking at these drams on the table here, they're all natural color, and they're quite quite similar, but they're a little bit diverse.
They'd make any scotch jealous.
They would.
And I guess I know we just mentioned a brief, difference there, but a similarity, if anything, would be that bourbon does draw a huge part of its character from the barrel it's been matured in. So that's just like scotch.
Yeah.
And bourbon is considered fully matured at 4 years of age, although it doesn't actually have a minimum requirement for it to be called bourbon. So that doesn't really stop distillers from aging their spirits for longer if they want to.
Yeah, I know we'll get into it, but I'm pretty sure the Longbranch here, that's been aged for 8 years.
Yeah,
So it's aged for double its length of its full maturity. Scotch, on the other hand, it needs to be in the cask for a minimum of 3 years for it to be legally classified as scotch. However, even in that point, very few distilleries would ever put out a 3-year-old scotch.
Yeah. I don't think you'd ever see that. Yeah.
They're usually aged for anywhere between... we looked at the Wee Beastie, which was 5 years. That's probably the youngest one we've purchased, but most of them sit between 8 to 15 are the common, more reasonably affordable range that you'd buy in scotch.
Yeah, and I guess almost all bourbon begins with the same 3 or 4 ingredients, which are corn, barley, rye, or wheat.
Okay, and so to contrast that, scotch or single malt scotch is made just from malted barley, but bourbon here needs to be at least 51. So it needs to be more than half of its mash needs to be corn.
Yeah, and I guess those common flavor profiles in bourbon are vanilla, oak, and caramel. So if anything, some of those ex-bourbon cask scotches that you'd see, that's probably where they're drawing some of those notes that we pick up, like some of those
Right.
sweet notes we pick up.
Yeah, they carry it from the residue left over from the bourbon's aging process in them.
Yeah, and funny you mentioned aging process. That's the next point I got here. So the aging takes place in new charred oak barrels, and again, due to that process, just like we mentioned, the caramel and vanilla, they're almost always present because bourbon's aging takes place in those new charred oak barrels. And look, some can be sweeter than others, though they typically always lead with strong flavors of vanilla, caramel, custard, butterscotch, marzipan, maple, honey, or chocolate. So there's like a lot of sweet things there, but I think there's enough there for you to maybe branch off into other different categories as well.
Okay, yeah, and I'd imagine, like, I mean, like, they all sound like very enticing, very nice and pleasing to a wide range of palates, but I'd imagine that a lot of, like with Scotch, like with different distilleries within the regions of Scotland, you would usually find different kinds of product that the distillers put out. So, like, what are we looking at when it comes to variation in bourbons?
Right, yeah. So I guess we'll go over some notes in terms of what you'd pick up in different kinds of bourbon. So at least we have a reference point and we give you guys a reference point as well. So maybe if you're not familiar with bourbon and you can kind of see what notes would be present in certain bourbons, and maybe you decide whether or not you want to take the plunge as well and join us in bourbon country.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know a lot of people here in Australia, the most common bourbons you'd be familiar with would either be Jim Beam or Wild Turkey. They're probably the two that I
readily available.
know the most readily available, more often than not, usually used as a mixer.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a step out of, I guess, my comfort zone, because I haven't really gone into bourbon previously, or at least not as much as I have with Scotch and other whiskies.
Yeah, same for me. I guess if you're looking at, different categories that you'd put them in,
Yep.
you'd probably look at a sweet bourbon, which the notes that you'd find in a sweet bourbon would be mint, vanilla, brown sugar, caramel, cinnamon, apple, maple syrup, and oak.
Okay, so you're looking at somewhat reminiscent of, I guess, more of the Speyside whiskies, which usually carry those vanilla, caramel, and apple, as well as like the slight amount of spice.
Yeah, if you're trying to compare it, I guess, to a Scotch, right?
Yep.
And now if we're looking at a floral bourbon, now that's where a bit of spice comes in. Vanilla is still present. Toasted oak, orange zest, honey, mint, butterscotch, black pepper. So floral flavors, they're usually present in bourbon due to the actual yeast used in the fermentation.
Right.
And those common floral notes are actually more, I guess, akin to honeysuckle or rose petals. And then they're usually just followed by fruity or herbal notes. So I guess like a floral bourbon could probably be like a Highland
I know the...
But even in Speyside, you'd find
You do find some of those notes do carry over. So in line with that, I think you're looking at... So I guess like the most common comparison you'd be looking at when it comes to Scotch would be those lowland Scotches, which are known for their very grassy, florally honeysuckle kind of flavor profiles.
Okay, yeah. And I think probably what threw me off was that zesty orange was actually present in Oban.
Yeah,
which
so
is like a Highland Dram.
To the Highlands as well, yeah.
So I guess the next category would be looking at would be a hot and spicy bourbon. So
spicy.
Yeah, if a bourbon's like typically presenting itself as a spicy bourbon, it can refer to two things. So that's either the spice of a pepper or a baking spice.
Okay, so you're either looking, like pepper or sherry kind of spice notes, yeah.
So, and that heat can either be attributed to the alcohol percentage present or the aging process that the bourbon actually used.
Right, okay.
So, if you're seeing notes of baking spice, it'll often refer to nutmeg, cinnamon, allspice, and anise.
Okay, so they're the common notes that you'd find in a lot of whiskies, a lot of scotches that have been aged in sherry casks.
Yeah.
And then when you're talking about like the spiciness, I guess it's when you're kind of hitting on the island whiskies throughout Scotland. So whether you're talking about Talisker, Highland Park, or Jura, a lot of them carry those kind of spice that comes down to like a black pepper.
And all those notes, they come from a variety of sources during the production, which is the rye grain, the yeast, or the actual barrel used.
Okay.
Now, the next category would be a wood-forward bourbon. So many bourbon drinkers like the notes that malt time leaves on the bourbon, so like that's more time in the cask that leaves and imparts on the bourbon. And those notes would be almond, walnut, cedar, pecan, and oak.
Okay, so yeah, those very grainy, earthy, woody type of notes.
Yeah, so like if we're trying to compare that to a Scotch, where would we normally find those kind of notes?
when it comes to comparing those with the Scotch, it depends on, I guess, really where you're looking at. Because
Yeah.
for me, nothing strikes out particularly as carrying those notes. If you start combining a bit more of, if you're keeping it more to the sweeter side, then you are looking at a lot of the Speyside whiskies,
Yeah.
which do carry some of those, nutty flavors that are also combined with the New American oak barrels that a lot of Speyside whiskies are aged in. But then if you start adding smoke or, if you start smoking those whiskies, you could potentially be stretching over to Islay as well.
Yeah. And like a wood forward bourbon, they can be tannic like black tea or just rich with flavor. And then that can make it a little harder for new drinkers to appreciate, which is why I mentioned before, like those drinkers that are experienced with bourbon, they appreciate this type of bourbon a lot more.
Okay, yeah. So in much the same vein that if you're someone who's interested in the Speyside areas of Scotland, you maybe wouldn't necessarily introduce them to Islay whiskies
Yeah, no.
if they're beginners. Like, I mean, like it can work for some beginners, but I mean, I'm not saying like wood forward is the exact same as Islay whiskies, but I guess you're more talking in that same vein of it can be a little bit more rougher on the edges when it comes to trying it for new whiskey drinkers.
Yeah, and the last category we've got here is grain forward. So these bourbons here, they're on the complete opposite end when it's compared to a wood forward bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gently aged and they've not been given the chance to have a lot of their flavor driven from that barrel. So they don't carry any of those oaky characteristics. So the flavor that's actually present is corn, barley, rye, or wheat. So you'd probably get a common note of hot cereal or cornbread. And I don't think that's a note we normally pick up in Scotch anyway.
No, I think this comes from, I guess, the variety of grains that they use in their mash that doesn't really have a correlation when it comes to Scotch whiskies. But if we're looking at the three that we've got here on the table, where would we say they sit?
So definitely for Buffalo Trace,
They're those hot and spicy?
Yeah, it's sitting in like hot and spicy category.
Yep.
But it's more leaning towards a baking spice.
Okay, so it's more that the sweeter sherry spices than the spicy pepper.
Yeah. And if you're looking at Elijah Craig, that's more of a wood forward bourbon. And I'm inclined to believe as well that Longbranch would be sitting in that wood forward category as well. Because if you're looking at a Wild Turkey, like say Wild Turkey 101, that would be firmly sitting in a wood forward bourbon category.
See, if we're looking at Longbranch, it was refined with Texas mesquite, which is a wood, like a tree that they commonly use in cooking to give a lot of that woody flavor. And then in American oak charcoals as well. So yeah, you are looking at a bit more of those woody, borderline smoky notes.
Yes, I was right. And ladies and gentlemen, you might be surprised, but we're pretty new to bourbon as well. So hence the cheer.
Yeah.
And I was correct. From my very limited experience in Longbranch. So
hit it on the mark.
Yeah, so going into these drams here, I think we should just get into it. And we're going to start with Buffalo Trace.
Yep, so let's look at Buffalo Trace. Now they're quite a popular whiskey. I believe they also made it into Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible.
Yeah, and he's quoted as saying this is one of the world's great whiskies.
So I think it's a fitting one to start off with. And
Definitely.
I mean, like, we tried the Glen Grant, which he put in his Whiskey Bible for 2020.
Yeah, for 2020, yep.
So trust his opinion and let's hope he doesn't let us down when it comes to this bourbon.
Yeah, and I doubt he will because, I mean, if you're looking at the list of awards that Buffalo Trace has under their belt, there's quite a lot there.
Yeah, they seem to be quite acclaimed.
Yeah, so feeling we're probably going to enjoy this one.
Okay, so first impressions, picking it up, it's like a deep, rich, golden color bordering on caramel.
I'd probably go with amber.
Amber?
Yeah,
that's fitting.
But no mosquitoes in this.
We will not be reenacting Jurassic Park here.
Yeah, no. No copyright strikes, please. I said no.
Okay, what have we got on the nose?
Definitely sweet.
Mm-hmm. Also somewhat refreshing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a mint there.
Yep, I'm getting borderline mint and vanilla.
Yep, you're mainly getting that vanilla note, and then that mint just kind of comes through and gives you a little kick. And really sugary.
Yep, like a very sweet, syrupy.
I mean, on the nose, it's really pleasant.
It is very enticing.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's really inviting on the nose. Like, just drink me.
Now, we've had it sitting out for a couple of minutes since the start of the pod, so I think we're ready to jump straight onto the
Oh
palate
yeah,
as
we're
well.
just going to jump straight into all three of these.
I mean, like, as we said, because they don't have a minimum age requirement and they don't often carry an age statement, that it's not necessary to leave it sitting out for a certain amount of minutes in the glass.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not to say you shouldn't, just to see how it changes, but I think if anything, that's just better for us here, because then we can just get straight into it.
Yeah. Oh, that is smooth.
Definitely.
That is
Very
very
smooth dram. Mm-hmm. Vanilla is still present on the palate, I'd say.
Yep.
And
I see what they mean by the baking spice. Like, I'm
Yep.
definitely getting, I guess, the spices you use in the baking, but as well as like a brown sugar too.
yeah, it's definitely some of those sherry notes there. Like those notes that you typically associate with a sherry casked scotch. I definitely get the sugar, and that spice is a baking spice.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say I get anise, like that licorice kind of flavor. I definitely don't pick that up.
No, yeah, I'm missing that here.
And I think what I'm liking about the finish so far as well is I'm finding it to be a pretty long finish. Like I'd characterize this as long,
Yep.
but you could almost be deceived into saying medium just because of how smooth this is, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't really I know we shouldn't be doing comparisons between bourbon and scotch, but we've had some really long finished scotch whiskies that do stay in your mouth and the flavor's still overtly present there that this doesn't have, but I would call it a long finish. Like, it takes a while to leave as you digest all the flavors.
It takes a while to leave, and every now and again the baking spice just comes back.
Yep. And what I'm getting, and I guess it's like, okay, so I'm distinguishing two different things. I'm getting the baking spice that you'd commonly get with, like, say you're cooking an apple pie.
Okay,
With apples. But that apple note is also coming across in the sense of, like, that sweet toffiness. So if you've got, like, a toffee-covered apple,
Yep.
that's definitely present here.
But I mean, I'd say this is like a really good intro so far. So
Oh, this has been great. And I know we've mentioned before, sweet hasn't always been I don't have a big sweet tooth, so hasn't always been my go-to. But the combination between that sweetness with the spices as well as the fruit is just very pleasing.
yeah, because I was about to ask you anyway, like, because I know you don't like the sweeter drinks. So I was going to think, like, I wasn't sure how you like the idea of a bourbon episode. And I was wondering if maybe the smoothness could help, I guess, offset the sweetness, because of just how smooth it is to just drink and just enjoy. You're really able to just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that was most surprising to me, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, coming from growing up here in Australia, where we don't usually drink too much bourbon, and when we do, it's usually as a mixer, and you're either having the standard cheapest Jim Beam or Wild Turkey, not ones that you do normally drink.
Yeah, you wouldn't
neat.
really necessarily drink those just neat. Right?
It's more of I want to consume a large percentage of alcohol in a short period of time, so I
Yeah.
go for a spirit and use it as a mixer.
Yeah, or if it's like just one of those things, you're just a bit over beer and you just
Yeah.
want to need to mix it up, drink something
Something
else.
a little lighter.
Yeah, like you wouldn't go into like Jim Beam trying to enjoy it. And I'm just saying I'd say that's bottom shelf Jim Beam. Like,
Bottom
I'm sure
shelf.
there are other bottlings of Jim Beam that are very, very good.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to try it, I guess, as a comparison both between bottom shelf Jim Beam and a higher shelf Jim Beam.
Oh, yeah,
because
definitely.
I'd like to know what else they have to offer, seeing as, like,
That's,
It
I
is-
mean,
it is
just
very
seeing how
surprising.
good this is, right?
yeah. And I mean, like, you could almost tell what kind of experience you're in for, what kind of mouthfeel you're in for by the legs on this. Like, the legs of this buffalo are just divine. The whiskey, not the buffalo itself.
Because I mean, the bottle is facing you. You are looking
Yeah.
at that buffalo in the eyes as you were saying that. I was just making sure.
I mean, that guy definitely lifts, like, just rippling muscles there. But I'm talking about the whiskey's legs at the moment.
Yeah.
They're very thick, they're very long, they're very defined. So you know you're in for a very pleasant, syrupy mouthfeel.
Yeah. So I think maybe we add a teaspoon of water as we
Oh yeah, I forgot about
customarily do. I know. I could just see not stopping, and I was like, okay, I need to just rein this in now.
Very taken aback and very interested in this. So it's only recently we've started adding. Well, only recently I've started adding water to Scotch. It's only since we've started to delve into the palate, what else Scotch has to offer on the nose and the palate, and how that changes with water. Like, that's took me by surprise. So, okay, so after adding the water,
You know, I'm gonna say it's really weird, but on the nose, could I even say vanilla Coke?
okay, Yep. And this is one of the things, maybe just a power of suggestion, but maybe you're right, because that is definitely what I'm picking up.
Yeah, I wasn't getting that before, but with the water, like I'm getting vanilla Coke. And I don't know, is that because, I guess, would you say because of the molasses? Like that molasses note? I don't know,
I think it's really reduced that kind of thick syrupy,
Yeah.
the thick syrupy, I guess, note that you pick up when you smell it. That's kind of dulled down. You're
Yeah, and
getting more
even
of
that
vanilla.
that fresh mintiness that was kind of there
Yeah, that's
before, that kind of
little bit
gone down as well.
faded a little bit into the background. And yeah, that vanilla as well as some kind of sweetness, whether it's the molasses, but that's definitely vanilla Coke. Yeah, that's really weird. Like an uncarbonated vanilla Coke.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting like the fizzy, bubbly, carbonated sense.
I'd say on the palate, with the addition of water, the actual sweetness that we got before
That's dulled.
dulled significantly.
Yeah, the
because
spices
now
are
it's
coming
just the
across stronger.
spices. And for the spices that we are picking up, it's all that same baking spice.
Yep. And I'm getting, I guess, like, a woody graininess at the back as well. Oh man, this is pleasant. Like, surprised me again. We had this once before, tried again, and damn, bourbon.
Yeah, it's really good. It's very, very good. So I've just finishing off my dram there, so the notes still remain the same. Thoroughly more of the baking spice now with that addition of water. Now for me, what would I say in terms of, would I drink this without the addition of water? I think I could say I prefer it without the water.
I would agree. I think while the water does dull down the sweetness, I think it works better with the sweetness.
Yeah, it's a lot more balanced.
A lot more balanced, a lot more complex. Like I was picking up a lot more of a difference. Like I was getting the spices, I was getting the apple pie, I was getting the toffee apple, and that kind of changed quite a bit. And I know we've talked about like we like when whiskeys change after adding water, but I think it was just more enjoyable before.
Yeah, I guess like if you drew a line, you'd say with the water, it's, I guess, not as wavy.
Yep.
But without the water, there's significantly more peaks and troughs. Like it's constantly up and down, different, a lot more going on, a lot more experiences there for you to actually have. And I think a new thing for us, like we'll use this as our first one. So Daniel, a Dram in words. What are you thinking of this one?
This one for me is probably getting two very different pictures. It's either the first one isn't really accurate, just more fits with the palate. It was at home cooking an apple pie, like mix, like you've got the apple pie in the oven cooking, and as it's the cinnamon, the brown sugar, and the apple that's coming across to me strongly there. But yeah, for more a Dram in words, I would say it's, I don't know what the correct word for it is, like a fair, a carnival.
Yep.
Like you're out there, you buy a toffee apple, you're walking around, you've got like maybe corn cooking in the background if you've got like corn on the cob there. And yeah, there's like a sweetness in the air. That's probably the way I'd equate it. I don't know if that
I think
completely encapsulates it. But
pretty good description. I think for me, it's like you're at the fair, you got the toffee apple, you've taken it off the table, and a bit of the table came with it.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's what it
you
is.
got like a splinter of wood on the bottom of it.
So I think that's for me. You've gone, you're having a good day at the fair. You're like, all right, here, let me get this toffee apple. Grab it. It's a little bit stuck. You're pulling a bit. You give it that last pull, and a bit of the table came with it. So you got a bit of that wood.
Yeah.
So
no, that's quite accurate.
So as always, our ratings will always be at the tail end of the pod.
Yeah,
so after our last stream here today. So without further ado, let's get into Longbranch. Matthew McConaughey's Longbranch.
Yes. So Matthew McConaughey, he actually went on with Wild Turkey as like the face of them for a bit before he decided that he wanted a little bit more say in the creative direction that Wild Turkey were taking. So
All right.
Yeah, so Matthew McConaughey, he went on as like the face of Wild Turkey in a lot of their ads, but then he really wanted to reintroduce it to the world at large, to a younger generation that kind of viewed it as, I guess, like a stuffy, older, harsh drink that
Oh, yeah,
they
or
weren't
just
really out
something
to
cheap,
enjoy. Yeah,
right?
basically.
Or just something you
either
could
a
just mix
mixer
with whatever.
or something that you wouldn't drink because your grandfather does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he went on with them as a face, but then he wanted to take a bit more of a active role in it.
As you do.
Yeah. So he became like a creative director. So he started working with, I believe, his name was Eddie Russell, the master distiller at Wild Turkey. And over a couple of years, they collaborated working on different
Just variation.
variations of
Yep.
it. Yeah. So he got sent different tastings. They, as we mentioned at the top, it was mainly Texas mesquite to try and bring a little bit more of a different variation, different note into Kentucky bourbon.
Okay.
And yeah, then they ended up settling on what we now have in front of us, which is Longbranch.
Okay, well, I'm going to get straight into the nose because I've been looking forward to drinking this dram again. Okay, definitely on the nose straight away, oak. It's like a
Yep.
strong wood on the nose.
There's okay, should have paid more attention when I was trying this before. There's a strong note that I'm getting, and it's hitting something in my mind that I can't quite put a finger on at the moment. I may have to add this in when we look back on this one in a future pod, but it hit a recollection point that I just can't put my finger on. Oh, it's like a sugary cereal,
Frosties?
like a Frosted Flakes.
Yeah, that's just Frosties, isn't it? With a
Frosties,
tiger on
yeah.
it.
Okay, so like that is really bugging me now because I picked it up and I'm like, oh my god, what is that? It's like that, yeah, sugar frosted coated cereal.
Okay, yeah, I'm more getting the wood note. Like it's a really strong wood note for me. And there's a bit of sweetness there, some
Yeah.
caramel. I'd say it's more caramel for me.
Okay, yeah, like I think that frosted cereal I might be getting. There's something else there that it's kind of bugging me now because I can almost put my finger on it, but I can't quite describe it. I mean, like it's undoubtedly woody, but there is something else there that is.
Yeah, there's something
striking
else
me.
there that's just kind of in the background. Definitely, there's something else there, but I'm not quite sure what you're getting in terms of that cereally note.
Yeah, I've got like 3/4 of this bottle left. I have to
we
spend
can just
some time contemplating
We
this.
can always come back. Can always come back to it.
Oh man, it's one of those things where it like hits like a nostalgic point in your mind, and you're like, that reminds me of, but then my mind goes blank, and I'm like, I can't quite get that. Okay, anyway, on to a bit more of what we can actually describe.
Yeah.
No, I'm still getting that note that I can't quite put my finger on.
All right.
But,
So
okay.
maybe if we just go onto the palate,
Yeah.
then maybe you can see if that does anything for you. So there is vanilla present on the palate, but it's a very different vanilla to what was in Buffalo Trace. It's a lot more, like, dare I say, like creamy?
Creamy, buttery, yeah.
Yep, definitely. It's a lot more.
Like when Buffalo Trace hit your
Yeah.
mouth, it was a very thick, syrupy caramel. This one's very light and
Yep. Yeah, the
flowy.
caramel. Yeah, the caramel's a lot more. Yeah, like you said, buttery. So like melted butter. I guess it's like just coating my palate really well. I get a bit of a citrusy note. as
Okay,
well.
yep, I can see
Get
that.
some citrus, and there is like a sweetness lingering in the back, and I just can't quite put a finger on the sweetness yet.
Yeah, it's like a honey florally sweetness.
Yep. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, the honey. That's probably what I'd say it is. But again, very pleasant. Very, very pleasant. Very smooth.
Another surprising addition from bourbon, which just keeps getting me off guard.
Just looking at the ABV on this one, I think it was 40% as well, wasn't it?
Yes.
40%. Yeah, I don't think we mentioned it with Buffalo Trace, but that was 40% as well.
Yeah, so both of these are 40%. Okay, so like Scotch, bourbon can't be bottled at less than 80 proof, so less than 40%. Oh yeah, the water. I was getting low on my dram when I remembered.
Luckily, this time you reminded me.
Yeah.
But even on the finish, without the water, I could say I almost get some peppery notes on the finish. Mm-hmm. It's a very different spice to the spice we were picking up in Buffalo Trace. So it's not the baking spice. So then that just leaves like that peppery kind of note. Yeah.
woody finish. Yeah, I'm definitely getting like a peppery and oaky finish.
I think what's really interesting with the addition of water to the Longbranch is how much more the caramel is coming out now.
Yeah, whatever I was trying to pick up earlier, that's disappeared. Like I'm not getting that immediate overwhelming hit of something that I can't quite place. But the caramel,
like it was never there in the first place.
Yeah, maybe I was just imagining it. How much was the Buffalo Trace? Like maybe it wasn't more. Maybe it was more than 40%. Maybe I had a little bit too much of that.
But yeah, I think with that water, that caramel is significantly more prominent now.
Yeah, and I'm picking up a a spice underneath it. Not cinnamon, more of a
Nutmeg, maybe?
nutmeg.
Yep.
Yep, definitely.
And even on the nose, that oaky, woody note, that's gone now.
Yeah. It's not as, like, I've noticed on the nose after adding the water, it doesn't hit me as strong
Oh, well,
as it did originally. I guess
yeah.
that comes with adding water to it. But
yeah, that comes with adding water and the fact that they are bottled at 40%.
yeah.
So maybe as well, that's probably why we prefer the Buffalo Trace without the water, because that water would probably knock it down from 40% to even below.
Yeah, to about, I think, what, 36, 35, depending on how much water you add.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot more, I don't know, like grassy and floral after adding the water.
Yeah, I was about to say. It's almost mulchy.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, maybe not mulch. Maybe like that smell when when like wood is wet.
Okay. Yep. No.
So that's
very,
what I'm getting.
Very
Like,
good.
like that's what I'm getting on the palate. It's like wet wood that's just like drying, and then that smell that it gives off.
No. Perfect. Yep, definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm getting on the palate. I mean, a weird note, but that's actually what I'm getting on the palate, and that's
Yeah,
what I'm linking like through my sense of smell and my palate is just that smell that you'd pick up when just wood's drying.
No, that's working. I think that was that grassy, mulchy note that I was picking up. But it's definitely like, so I'm getting a floral sweetness as well as that, wet wood. No. Yeah, it's weird that's like when you said that, like that's what I was getting. I mean, like even on the nose, like I'm starting to pick up a little bit more of it. It's almost a very candy sweetness.
Yeah, it's like a very different sweetness to Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
And well, actually, Buffalo Trace, we didn't really pick up much sweet notes. If anything, it was just more vanilla, whereas this one's a bit more of the caramel notes intertwined with everything else.
No, but very pleasant. Like, I don't know how this compares to the other range that Wild Turkey has to offer, but I would regularly drink this.
For me, I'd definitely keep that in my cupboard, readily available to drink.
And I know we haven't really mentioned it, but especially for us here in Australia, like bourbon is so affordable, especially when you compare it with whiskies and scotch. Like I know we've talked about price point when it comes to scotch before, but that's more of a relative perspective. Like at the moment, we're looking at spending between, what are we saying, like $80 to $120? That's kind of the range of where we're spending, but that's kind of pretty pricey when it comes to deciding to buy alcohol, especially when you're looking at bourbon, which is almost half that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Buffalo Trace, I think it was $46. I think that I picked it up for.
Oh wow, yeah. And Longbranch was about 55.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, maybe a Buffalo Trace was maybe like 55. I can't remember.
Okay.
It was a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, significantly more affordable when you're comparing it to Scotch. So I think like as we've just finished our drams of Longbranch here, again a very good follow up to Buffalo Trace.
Yep.
So and again, it's just continually making us want to keep going down this path of drinking bourbon.
Yeah, it's amazing when you like let yourself into an area you maybe had your door closed to previously, like what else it has to offer, and you're like, why did I have my door closed to bourbon? I don't understand, because it is so good.
Yeah, I almost feel bad that I've neglected it for this long.
I am sorry, Kentucky.
Yeah, then now I'm just kind of like, oh man. I mean, Kentucky, I love your KFC, but I didn't...
Didn't realize you guys did a whiskey as well.
Didn't realize the bourbon was as good.
Yep.
So I'm going to have to apologize for that. And don't worry, we're going to make up for it in future episodes.
Yes, we will.
Yeah,
absolutely.
we're going to be tackling these bourbons head on. Mm-hmm. And that just brings us into our last dram here
Before
for today.
we do, dram in words.
Oh, yes. The segment that I introduced and forgot about so quickly. All right, a dram in words.
Too keen to get into the Elijah Craig.
Too keen to get back into Elijah Craig. So for me, Elijah Craig.
Longbranch.
Again, just
two drams in and...
Tunnel vision, guys. Longbranch, a dram in words. Okay. I'm sitting in like a wheat field. Right?
Yep.
I'm sitting in a wheat field and there's like a fire burning in the distance, but it's not far. I wouldn't say distance. It's like just maybe in my eyesight. I can see it.
You're getting the warmth from it, but not
getting the warmth from it. And then I get that woody smell. Mm-hmm. It's like coming through, and I'm just kind of just sitting there. And then people are coming over. They got like a lamb, putting it on there. And it's like, okay. And then they just drizzled some honey on the lamb to roast it on the spit. And I'm just sitting there, and I was like, cool. I'm gonna have me some of that.
Nice. Yep. Pretty similar. I am also in a wheat field. When he said it, I was like, stole the words out of my mouth. Sitting on a wheat field. I don't know if I'm near a fire, but maybe like picturing it with Australian countryside. Maybe there has been bushfires in the summer just gone. You're kind of reaching the end of summer. You had a rain. The field is dry, but the wooden fence posts are still wet.
Yep.
So getting the wheat, getting like the residue of the burnt charred trees as well as the wet wood. And there's a sweetness that just wafting over. Maybe from the house, maybe from somewhere else. Can't really pinpoint the sweetness.
Would you say it's honey that's cooking on a lamb on the fire?
No, it's those frosted flakes.
All right,
It's the Frosties that I've got like a cereal box out there with me and I'm just chunking down those Frosties. No, but I'm standing in a wheat field, maybe even a cornfield, like young cornfield.
Okay.
Hard to say. And then, yeah, it's got the wet wood. Like the wood is still wet, but the ground is dry, if that makes sense. Like, so it'll take longer for that wood to dry. And then, yeah, the charred trees in the background. That's Longbranch for me.
Yeah, and I guess since we did it with Buffalo Trace as well, with or without water?
It's hard to say. I really enjoyed how the water changed to Longbranch. So I would almost add water towards the end of my dram. I drink the majority of it without water, and then I'd add a little bit of water just to get that last little difference, last little change that it makes.
Yeah, I'd probably do the same. And I think, and again, I guess we keep peeling back the curtain in this episode. Yep. But again, I guess we've started to measure our pours. Yeah. I think we realized we've been a little too, I guess, heavy-handed past couple episodes. So we're just measuring now. So there's a little less in the can, but what can you do?
Yep. Goddamn being responsible. Okay, on to the Elijah Craig.
All right, about time. I can actually say on to Elijah Craig now. I think the immediate point of difference between Elijah Craig, the Wild Turkey Longbranch, and the Buffalo Trace is the note of alcohol that's definitely present compared to those two. And that's, of course, attributing to Elijah Craig sitting at 47%, right?
94 proof.
Yep.
Yeah, you can definitely tell it's a higher proof than the others.
Straight on the nose, you can tell straight away.
I'm picking up that mint, like a mint similar to what I was getting in Buffalo Trace. It's strongly accompanied by a heavy wood note.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the woody note, it's probably maybe even more like cedar, not necessarily oak.
Yep.
Like a different type. It's like a different type of wood that I'm getting compared to Longbranch.
Yeah, it's undoubtedly wood, but yeah, it is a different type of wood.
Could even get a bit of almond on the nose.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a bit of a nuttiness there.
Like a roasted nuttiness.
Yeah. Like the last bit on the nose. It's like when you've got that fresh leather.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, you got like a fresh leather. That's what it is, yeah. That's something I'm getting as well. Yeah, it's just onto the palate. A lot punchier than Longbranch and Wild Turkey. Again, attributing to that 47%.
Getting, not on the level of peated whiskey, but getting a smoke.
Oh, yeah.
As well as spice. Like the spices are really strong in this.
Yeah, the spices, maybe baking spice. I'd say like similar to baking spice. I wouldn't necessarily say it's not like a peppery or a chili kind of spice. It's a baking spice. But yeah, there's a smoke there that's just kind of lingering in the back. But it's a very different smoke to what you'd experience in an Isla.
Yep. Okay. So this, definitely different to Isla. But what if I could to provide not quite a dram in words, but a mental picture for what I've currently experienced on the palate. It's like you're about to bake cookies. So you've got the cookie dough mixed up, ready to put in the oven. You open the oven. Maybe there's something in the oven that fell down the back and had burnt. So as you open the oven and are starting to heat up the cookie dough, you're getting the smoke kind of wafting in at the back, very not faint and not light, still there, but just in the background. And then you've got, I don't know, cookie dough, cookies. That's kind of what I'm getting. Like a weird, sweet cookie note.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I'm not really getting that. I get, for me, I definitely get a woody note that's accompanying the spice. That's definitely present. They're both together. And then that's bringing off a bit of a smoky background. And
yeah, I should preface that by saying initial, on the first, that's more on the finish. That's more on getting on the finish. Right. On the first initial impact of the dram in my mouth, it's that spice and that woodiness is overwhelming.
Yeah.
Not overwhelming, but it's like that is what is predominantly coming through.
Yeah. And for me, the finish as well, it's a pretty long finish.
Yeah.
With the finish, it's very different to the palate because the finish is actually pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So I'd say like out of the three, this is probably the most complex dram out of the three.
Yeah, there's a lot to break down in this one.
And it maybe not even necessarily break down, but there's a lot more going on. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more like bouncing around my palate compared to the other two that we had.
Yeah. Yeah, that mintiness is still coming across on the nose. Don't know if I mentioned that at the start, but...
Even on the nose, you almost get that similar wood drying.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's still present as well. You know what I think the smoke is now? Because I've been trying to put a finger on the smoke because I've been saying it's a different smoke compared to Isla.
Yep.
Like, you know when you do, I guess, woodwork at school and they've given you the soldering
Soldering
pen?
iron thing that
Yeah.
you used
And
to...
then you go into the wood and they're like, oh, yeah, you can write your name in the wood. And you're writing your name in the wood and then that smoke's coming off of that.
Okay, yeah.
As you're doing that, I'd say the smoke's more akin to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not necessarily a campfire, but it's wood burning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not wood on fire, but it's wood burning.
Yeah, because it's a really light smoke.
It is.
And it's not like a heavy smoke that you'd associate with, like if you're looking at Lagavulin or even Ardbeg.
No,
like Ardbeg, you'd be looking at maybe like a savory kind of hammy smoke. But then Lagavulin, it's like I'm standing over the campfire or the bonfire, and then that's just like wafting over me.
Yeah, it's like you're almost getting the actual smoke in your nose and
Yep.
in your mouth. This is there, but it's not a peated bourbon. It's
No.
not peated, but it's... Yeah, it definitely has like a smoky presence.
What I'm really enjoying is that this actually has a bit of a bite to it.
Yeah. That's definitely sitting a lot more favorably with me over the sweety notes that a lot of them have carried. Like, while I have thoroughly enjoyed it, yeah, the bite, the oaky smokiness, cedary smokiness, cedar and smokiness that I'm getting from this is very, very pleasant, very enjoyable.
Yeah, and so even this like Elijah Craig, it's the small batch. So it really makes me want to go and hunt out the barrel proof. Because I think the barrel proof sits at, I think, like 60% or 61%. And like with that higher alcohol percentage...
120 proof?
Yeah, 120 proof. With that, there will be so much more complexity present in the actual bottle itself. And that has me so intrigued just because of how enjoyable and how complex this one's been so far.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's almost like we're giving away, I guess, our ratings at how much we've already, I guess, used Elijah Craig as a point of difference. And like we've continuously, I guess, gushed over it. I guess we'd probably stop and let's just get into that addition of water now.
Yep, I think we should. And also, just a side note, I said 120 proof. The barrel proof is actually 135.2 proof.
Damn.
So
makes me want it even more.
God damn it. There's a thing like what the water has done on the nose is reduced a lot of the woody bite and I guess, dulled down the proof.
Yep.
Allowed the sweetness as well as the mint to become a little bit more present.
Yeah, I was just about to say that mint is significantly more prominent now. And before we get into the palate with the water, I think what I really enjoyed as well with Elijah Craig, and I know we mentioned there's like that baking spice is a lot stronger than it was in the Longbranch and even the Buffalo Trace, and we were saying that's attributing to the proof. But even with that higher proof, this is still an incredibly smooth bourbon.
Oh yeah, like could drink it just as easily as I have been drinking the others.
Yeah, and like we mentioned before, like in the different categories of bourbon and those different tasting notes, how we mentioned that wood foil could probably be more like
difficult to introduce.
Yeah, difficult to introduce to. I could maybe see how that could be the case, right? And because I think maybe that baking spice could be strong for a lot of people.
Yep.
Especially like if there's a note of cinnamon or nutmeg present, that could throw a lot of people off. And then on top of that, you couple in a higher proof.
So you're getting like a burn of the alcohol as well as the bite of the wood that can be a little bit off-putting. And I guess that also comes down to the kind of people you're introducing to.
Yeah.
Like you introduced me to bourbon through Elijah Craig.
Yeah, and I think as well, like I used Elijah Craig as like an introduction to Daniel because I know Daniel's accustomed to drinking Scotch.
Yep.
So we can already tolerate and enjoy and try and pick those finer notes in a whiskey. Whereas if you're maybe introducing someone that isn't used to a hard spirit or just drinking spirits in general, then you might not want to go with Elijah Craig, right?
Yeah, like if we're choosing between the 3 bottles on the table here, I'd probably choose to introduce someone to bourbon through Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the safest bet.
And before we go on to another tangent here, let's just get back into the Dram.
Yep. So on the palate after adding the water.
The smokiness is definitely gone.
Yep.
For me, it's gone. I don't know about you, but for me, it's gone.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. Like it's changed a little bit. Like I'm still trying to identify where the smoke is, because as we said, it's not the same as like a peated Isla smoke.
Yeah, no. But definitely with the water, yeah, it's changed.
The
yeah,
spices
I
are
cut
still
you off.
there.
Yeah.
Spices are still there. The nutmeg's coming across pretty strong, and there's still definitely a very woody note there. Like that's really what I'm picking up very strongly in this.
Yeah, it's with that water, I'd say the woody notes maybe jumped up another level.
Yeah, there's definitely like a how to describe it, like a kick at the end that I'd probably associate with a wood. But yeah, to call it a wood, like if you were to describe, like even if you were to describe like the kind of bourbons at the start of the episode and you gave me them to try, I would definitely slot Elijah Craig in with a wood forward one.
Yeah.
Like undoubtedly, like it's really strong in that woody note.
You know, like even on the finish, I'm trying to think now what else. I could even say like on the finish with the Elijah Craig here, it's almost like you've got the toaster set to maybe like 3, maybe on to 4. So it's not necessarily burnt, but it's like just right.
Okay, yeah. I think on a similar vein, I'm getting like a lot of charred wood. Like,
okay, yeah.
It's, as we mentioned earlier, it's not wood that's on fire. And I would say this isn't, after adding the water, it's not wood that's currently burning, but it's wood that has been burnt.
Okay, yeah.
So I see what you mean by the toast. But yeah, for me, it's more of that
the woodiness,
already burnt wood. Similar to what I was getting at the very end of the Longbranch, when I was talking about wood, like trees that had been burnt.
Yeah.
But this is, it's wood that has already been burnt. Yeah, and there's still a sweetness on the palate.
I wouldn't say the sweetness is on the palate. I'd say it's more on the finish.
Okay. I'm getting it kind of sitting in the middle of my tongue. I just finished the Dram. It's definitely lingering into the finish. Yeah, like what I get is spice, immediate hit, and then the sweetness comes out and it's kind of lingering there, and then the finish overtakes with that burnt wood. Yeah, the very last thing that's left in my mouth is that already burnt wood. So how would you put Elijah Craig into words? Dram in words. Should I go first?
A Dram in words.
For me, Elijah Craig it's a thing that I would imagine, but haven't actually experienced. But I'm in the like Wild West of America. I'm standing on my porch of my ranch house. The sun's setting. I'm looking out over my ranch, and I'm just enjoying the area.
Yeah, again, just as I took your wheat field reference for Longbranch, you've taken my reference for Elijah Craig. I'm out there. I'm on my ranch. I'm in there with the horses. They're running around or galloping around. I don't know.
Cantering.
Whatever they do. whatever horses do. They're going around. That dust is kicking up.
Yep.
And I'm getting that dust. It's like it's wafting over me. Then you get the dust. You get the heat of the sun beating down. It's almost, the sun's so strong, it's almost toasting the wood.
Yep.
And then the wood's just like heating up. And it's almost just, you're in the Wild West. That's what this is. It's the Wild, Wild West.
Elijah Craig seems to be the Wild West. I think that's what it is giving me.
Yeah, and man, it's a very good one. I think that's for me, like my Dram in words. I'm on my ranch, sun's beating down, the horses are kicking up the dust, and I'm just in the Wild West.
You're like, what do I need to wet my whistle here? Elijah Craig.
Yeah.
Very pleasant. And like a really good introduction to bourbon, I think, for us.
Yeah, I think we've picked 3 very good Drams here for our first bourbon episode.
Yeah.
And they're very good, I guess, entry points for us to go into. And before we get into our ratings, maybe our ratings might be a little high for these ones. I guess if you're an experienced bourbon drinker and you're hearing and you're going, oh man, you guys are rating these pretty high. Well, I mean,
do you know what else is out there? Well,
yeah,
the short answer is we don't.
Yeah, we don't. So if you know and you're thinking, well, why are you rating this so high? Well, tell us, what bourbons do you think are better than these 3 that we need to go out there and grab?
Because this is like the entire spectrum of our world of bourbon that we have to work from. And as I said, like aside from the bottom shelf Jim Beam and Wild Turkey that we've been previously exposed to, this is, I mean, like it's the best of the range that we've tried because it's the only part of really what we have tried. So we're going to be rating this kind of on a different scale to our Scotch and single malt whiskies. So just because we've given one of these a number that may correlate to a whiskey we've rated of the same number may not mean they're on the same caliber, because they are quite different and diverse. So we're rating these bourbons on the scale of bourbon.
Yeah, so I think we'll get into the ratings, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the first one, Buffalo Trace.
Yep. So for me, Buffalo Trace, that's going to have to be a 7.
Yep, I'd rate it a 7 as well. I think it is like a solid, consistent, really enjoyable dram that you're not going to be disappointed by.
No, I don't think you would. No, not at all. And it's like just fitting that we started with that one because it was such a good entry.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the perfect usher, right?
It really is. He's a guy at the door that you want to be greeted by when you go to bourbon country.
He's been at the door 60 years, knows his stuff, knows how to open the door.
Yep.
I think it's just great. It's definitely well above average.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so Longbranch. So for me, Wild Turkey's Longbranch.
I'd probably give this one a 7.5.
7.5. Interesting. I mean, you cut me off there, but 7.
Took a little bit too long to answer, so I jumped in with a 7.5. I would go to this above the Buffalo Trace, but this may just be like, as we have said, our ratings are subject to change, especially in this, since our entire sample size is 3 bourbons. So that's what we're rating. I'm going to put it at a 7.5. I think it's well above average. Whether it makes it into that quite exceptional mark, don't quite know. So I can't give it an 8 just yet.
Okay, yeah. So as I repeat, for me, Wild Turkey's Longbranch.
So I would rate Elijah Craig. Okay, no, go.
All right, yeah. So Longbranch. Oh man, like I know we've used the 0.8s before, and I'm going to use it again. And even if it's like our first bourbon episode, I'm going to go 6.8.
6.8. Okay. Oh, wow. Yep.
Yeah, just that Longbranch, I really like it.
Yep.
I really, really do enjoy it. But like I've got a bit more like an inclination to the sweetness, right?
Okay.
So I'd say I prefer Buffalo Trace more because the sweetness is a lot more to my liking in that.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, as you just said, like it does come down to personal preference, which is why I've rated the Longbranch higher. Also, what played into that a little bit for me was the interplay Longbranch had with the water as well at the end. Like that change, that like additional experience that it gave kind of does push it a little bit higher. Like it's on par with the Buffalo Trace, but because it more matches my personal palate as well as the additional experience it gave with adding the water, pushed it a little bit higher for me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so now on to Elijah Craig. I'll start this time, as I was meant to with the Longbranch. Elijah Craig small batch, it's an 8.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an 8 for me. It sits well above the Buffalo Trace, like a whole point above.
Yep.
But I wouldn't say it's an all-time favorite. Like I couldn't just give it an all-time favorite because this is our sample size. It's just 3, right? So I don't want to just give out a 9 straight off the bat. And like Daniel mentioned just before, like these ratings can change and they will change as we continue to explore bourbon. But for me right now, Elijah Craig, it's an 8. It's quite exceptional. It's excellent.
Yeah, I would also rate it an 8. I was contemplating whether to give it a 7.8, 7.9, but I think it does make it into the 8s. And again, off our small sample size here, it's quite exceptional, especially because it was in my introductory bourbon.
Yeah,
I think it just really struck out and it opened the door for me, so it's deserving of an 8.
Yeah, so it's got a bit of that, like a little bit of that nostalgic vibe for it. Just like maybe Oban's got a bit of that for me, which is why I gave it a 9. Mm-hmm. You know, like I did post it onto Reddit, gave our reviews there, gave it a 9. Some people tore me a new one, but hey, it is what it is. I still think Oban's a 9. But like a little teaser in there for future episodes. But I think that 9 might change soon.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it might change soon because I did revisit Oban the other day.
Yep.
Might change soon.
Ooh, put on your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so we've mentioned Scotch a lot in this episode, but let's just steer it back to bourbon while we end the episode. So final ratings for me, Brad, Buffalo Trace, 7, Longbranch, 6.8, and then Elijah Craig, 8.
And I've gone Buffalo Trace, 7, Longbranch, 7.5, Elijah Craig, 8. So just increasing by half a mark each time. I think it was really representative of our experience. Started with 1, just improved from there for me. Bourbon has been a really eye-opening experience.
Yeah, definitely. That's only the word I'd use. It's been really eye-opening to the fact that we probably shouldn't have neglected it.
Yeah.
And what I'd say is on that little, I guess, chart of categories we gave at the start of the pod, I'd definitely say I lean more towards the wood forward bourbons, even though I did rate the Longbranch lower than the Buffalo Trace, and that's probably just because Buffalo Trace had a lot more of those sweeter notes that I was more accustomed to that I pick up in Scotch. So that's it for me. But then with that higher proof, the Elijah Craig is like, bam, this is what you actually like.
Yeah.
Right? You like wood forward. That's where I'm probably sitting in. I'm probably sitting in that wood forward camp. So again, if you know any good wood forward bourbons that carry those strong wood characteristics, send them through to us. Yeah.
To Brad.
Yeah, I was going to send it through to me. I was going to give you my personal email there, but just send it through, dramtalk.au@gmail.com.
Yeah, we know we've got quite a few American listeners out there, so we'd love to hear, I mean, not just your recommendations of bourbon, but that's been what this episode is about. So if you know some really spectacular bourbons that we may not really focus on or have focused on, but like we've got like a range in our shops and we just don't really know where to start or where to go from there. So we just love your opinions and your perspectives. And it doesn't just have to be our American listeners. It can be anyone from Australia that's a huge fan of bourbon as well. But even just that, like, what else does American whiskey have to offer? Like, we'd love to do a little bit more exploration into that area. Because we're looking at the Westward whiskey. We got that from the Whiskey Club, but we know they're a single malt. They're not a bourbon. So we know that they produce quite a range. So we're probably going to look at more of the standard entry points for Westward as well. But we'd, really love to know what else American whiskey has to offer, because so far from what we've seen, quite impressive.
Oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, like, I mean, these three here, like, if I'm looking at it, they're probably good entry points into bourbon. So it's like, I guess, appropriate that we ended up picking these three for our first bourbon episode. But like I mentioned before, I almost gave out my personal email. If you have another bourbon that you use as an entry point or like a gateway for people to jump into whiskey, then let us know, because we definitely want to know.
We're still vast, like extreme amateurs in the bourbon game.
Yeah, just to get in contact, reach out. Even if you don't have a bourbon to recommend, still reach out.
Yep.
We love to respond and get into contact with the people that are listening. So it's always been dramtalk.au@gmail.com, or you can reach out at Dramtalk Podcast on Instagram and we'll reply as soon as we can. Yeah, so with that, that's probably all we have time for today on Dances with Buffaloes.
Yep. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you for our next episode.
And as always, pour another dram!